So again, thank you all for joining. I know some of you are still trickling in, but we welcome you to the call. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Virginia, who's our guest speaker for today. Go ahead.
Thanks, Eneri. Thanks, Eneri, for allowing me to share my story. I've been enjoying listening to everybody else's stories over the past few months as Eneri's gone on this journey. As she mentioned, we are Maxwell certified team members together. We both started about the same time. We're probably coming up on our 1-year anniversary. And one thing I've learned, and it's hard for me sometimes, is we have to work together. Sometimes, I've been raised to be so self-sufficient that I forget to reach out to others and to bring them along the journey, because each of us have gifts to share. I'm going to start way back to give you a little bit of background. So first of all, as Eneri said, Virginia Sharp March, I have VSM coaching and consulting. Then another hat I wear with my husband is we have Dream Vacations March Travel Group. And I went full-time into both of these just over a year ago. But I'm going to start way back to let you know where my work ethic and some of my leadership came from. And that was, I grew up in Northeast Ohio on a dairy farm. So when you grow up on any type of farm, in order to do anything, an activity or go out, it always was, are your chores done? So from a very early age, actually second grade, I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning to do chores before going to school, coming home and doing chores before homework and dinner. But it was very rewarding looking back, though it wasn't something I wanted to do all my life. But growing up, I was very involved with 4-H. If any of you are aware of 4-H, the youth development program, and from the age of 9 through 19, I was in 4-H, which allowed me a lot of leadership opportunities, honed my skills. With sewing, I'm a big sewer. And so within 4-H, I had a really good mentor, Mrs. Benage, Mrs. B, as we called her, and she really taught me so much. And along my journey, there's always been mentors. When I was in high school, I was a teacher's aide for someone who had been my junior high cheer advisor, and then she mentored me through high school. So I feel that I am who I am because of the mentors and because of the possibilities and the way I grew up. My education, I actually hold a bachelor's of science in home economics, fashion interior merchandising. But then after I got that degree, decided not to use it. Still with student loans, said I'm not going to use it. And I ended up with a library job. We were at the time living in Cheyenne, Wyoming, where my husband was in the Air Force. And had 2 fabulous mentors at the library there in Cheyenne who mentored me along and encouraged me to stay in librarianship. And so when we moved back to Ohio from Wyoming, I got my master's of library science. And for the next 30 years was a professional librarian. And with my first 2 positions within libraries as a public library director were in Ohio, and they were self-governed, standalone libraries. So it was like running a small business. I was the HR department. I was the IT department. I was facility maintenance. I did it all. And I use a lot of those skills within my coaching because I have to learn how to wear different hats. And that's why I love to work with small business owners, because a lot of times they're wearing multiple hats. 6.5 years ago, my husband and I moved to North Carolina in order for actually a job opportunity for myself. I wanted a library system which had multiple branches, and I was looking for new challenges. And we moved to Jacksonville, North Carolina. It's on the coast. For those of you who have never heard of Jacksonville, North Carolina, we are the home of Camp Lejeune, Marine base, and also Camp Geiger. If you know of any Marines, they possibly have gone through my area. And so for 6.5 years, I was part of the Onslow County government system. It was very different going from a standalone library system to a government run library, but it was also very rewarding. I mean, I had a HR department that I could go to. I had an IT department that I could go to. It was fabulous. And it was the true opportunity to be a public servant, because during that time frame, we lived through Hurricane Florence and also COVID, the pandemic. And during that time frame, we pivoted from our librarian positions into Citizens Phone Bank during the hurricane and helping people that were experiencing, whether it be damage or concern, whatever their needs were. We were answering the phones and we were getting them the resources they needed. And then during the pandemic, we were getting people resources, getting them signed up. So it was a very rewarding time to be a part of the county. And throughout my career, I've always been coaching and mentoring people. I think the fact that I had some really strong mentors that encouraged me, I was able to give back. And as I was getting forward into my career, I was like, what is bringing me the most passion in my career? And what was bringing me the most passion was the coaching and mentoring. It just wasn't my strength. I was heavily involved in library associations at the state level and a little bit at the national level, also regional level. So I was coaching people there. They would come to me asking about questions, whether it was HR, projects, grants. And then I also had just acquaintances and family and friends reaching out to me. And I realized that's where my joy was at. That's where being able to help other people down their road and help them to find the answers. As a coach, we're not telling people what to do. We're helping them to discover what's the best path for them. So in 2019, I started taking steps towards becoming that coaching consultant. Through the American Library Association, there was workshops to attend. I started talking to other consultants and coaches. I also joined Toastmasters to work on my speech and presentation skills. So all of that was leading up to what I felt would be something down the road when I would be retiring. But in early 2022, things just started not feeling right where I was working. There was just some things occurring, and I'm a woman of faith, and the Lord was telling me that things are going to become uncomfortable. There's change coming, and it's going to be okay. But just to let you know, things are going to become uncomfortable. And in early 2022, I was working with HR with an issue with a staff member. And during that time frame, then, as I put it, I got caught in the vortex. And both that staff member and I were let go, which was quite unplanned, quite surprised, because the evaluations I had were stellar. And even after the fact, one of the assistant county managers who actually let me go said, this was the only flaw in your leadership. It was just one incident. And very disheartening. And it sort of rattled me a bit. However, I knew that the Lord had been telling me and prepping me all along and said, things aren't going to be uncomfortable. There's change coming, but it's going to be okay. And from that, I had the opportunity then. What was I to do? Was I to then go back and look for another library job, which would have required me to move? Where my husband and I are, we love it. And we say that we live where people vacation. And my parents had recently moved to be close to us also. So here we were at a crossroads. Do I, like I said, go into another library, or do I finally do what I said I wanted to do, which was the coaching and consulting? And I talked it over with my husband. We were in a position financially that I could take that leap. I tell people we've lost a lot of disposable income, but our needs are met. And what's even better is being able to work from home and now be more involved with my husband, with his business. We have the autonomy to do what we want. When I was working within the county, I had plenty of leave. And we had plenty of opportunities to travel within the travel business. But when you asked for 2 weeks off, and then 6 weeks later, you wanted 2 more weeks off, even though you had the time, it was a little bit frowned upon. So here's my opportunity to, put money and take action. So I looked into various coaching type opportunities, as I know there's, various certifications, but I chose the Maxwell team. I knew a few other Maxwell team members. I loved the resources that the Maxwell team offered, being able to utilize John Maxwell's books and teachings, and my coaching and my speaking has really been a great foundation. And they give lots of wonderful opportunities on a weekly basis through trainings. There's just a plethora there. And that was my good fit. And through that, I've been able to meet both Eneri and Uma. But as I also mentioned, going now full-time into the travel business with my husband. A year ago, when we took this leap, my husband had already had his business for 17 years. And I had been an owner for 6 of those 17 years, but not active. We also had 2 other owners. There was another couple involved. And once I became full-time, we decided that it was better for us just to be the owners. And the other owners, they were getting ready to retire out of the business. So it didn't go in the manner that we wanted, but we now own the business by ourselves. We bought them out. And because of that, my husband and I are able to make a lot more decisions that we couldn't before. We're able to take action on new ideas, which has been great. And so taking those 2, I tell people that I can help you plan stress-free travel, and I can help you plan a stress-free life. And I utilize what I'm coaching and using for my clients within my own life. One example is I have access to do the DISC personality assessment, which has really been an eye-opener for me, because I always felt that I was a procrastinator. Well, I wasn't necessarily a procrastinator. I was someone who I was more of a perfectionist. I wanted things to go well. I wanted it all to be figured out in the beginning. And because of that, if I didn't have all the answers, then I was slow to act. And because of this personality assessment, I learned that of myself. I learned where my strength was, which I should have known all along, which is being a team player, worrying about the team, building consensus. And that is a strength of mine that I've been able to utilize as a library director. But with that DISC personality assessment, I also learned about my husband, who's now, we're working very closely in the business, that he is very detail oriented. He's very compliant. He wants things done a certain way. I mean, he will do things start to finish, but sometimes it gets complicated because he throws in so many details. So it's really helped us work better together by knowing that. And then some of the other aspects that I work with my clients is time management. Having so much to do for 2 businesses. I mean, I know quite a few of you are have one business and you're very active on social media. So consider multiplying that by 2 and trying to figure out, a schedule for that and trying to figure out routines. So I've been working with like I said, my time management, I have a spreadsheet that I create for the week, which has deadlines, priorities of things that have to be done. I have just all my appointments set up. And then each day I divided them into half-hour segments. And then within that, I have on my laptop, I have a focus session timer. And I set it up for half-hour segments. And so at the end of the half-hour segment, I determine, okay, it's time to stop and move on to something else. And it's been working well for me. And things that are absolutely important, because I don't always stick to that. But if there's something that has to be, for example, recently I gave a luncheon when I got out of chamber. I know I needed to practice my speech. I set up an appointment. And as soon as that appointment started, I dropped everything, practiced my speech. And when that time was up, then I went back. So those are a few resources that I've been utilizing. I'm trying to be very much more intentional with what I do because there is so much to do between the two businesses. I keep considering in the back of my mind that I think having someone do our social media might be something that is coming down the road, because that is so much how we get our word out these days. Networking. I've learned a lot through Zoom networking about, just connecting with new people. I've met people from all over the world, which has been fantastic. But we also have been networking locally, which has been really good too. People love to talk about travel. It's an easy opener when you're networking. They don't always like to talk about their personal growth. So that's been a little bit more difficult. But, the line of, helping you plan your stress-free travel and a stress-free life does help with that. Setting boundaries has been a big thing. My husband has notices come up on his phone, come up on his tablet, and come up on his laptop. You can hear those notices anywhere in the house. Drives me crazy. But I keep explaining to him, then he'll complain because someone called and he picks up the phone during dinner. It's like, well, you didn't have to pick up that phone. So like I said, learning to set boundaries. And Brene Brown has a statement about choosing discomfort over resentment, which I've utilized recently. A few different groups had reached out to me to be part of their local organization, volunteer organizations. And I knew that I had to be intentional when deciding about that. I had to determine, okay, one, is it something that I wanted to do? And could I bring benefit to them? But it's also the benefit back. I mean, if you're going to give of your time, you want to make sure that you have benefiting, meaning, does it bring in you joy? Are you excited to go to that meeting or to that service project? And I knew that both of those groups, it wasn't going to bring me a lot of joy. And so I chose the discomfort of telling them no over the resentment of knowing, oh my gosh, I have another meeting. So I'm helping my husband set boundaries, and I help my clients set boundaries as I myself set boundaries. So it's a matter of coaching ourselves through situations. And I know several of you out there are coaches, which is great. And we have to coach ourselves at times. And I'm trying to look, I made a few notes, a few resources that I really enjoy. One is I have a spreadsheet of quote and stories that I always tend to turn to a lot. And it's easy then to search. So for example, a John Maxwell quote. I have a tab on my spreadsheet that's all John Maxwell quotes and where I found that quote. And I have another page that is just random people, random quotes. If I take a lot of notes out of a book, if you use a Kindle, there's an opportunity you can download. If you highlight things, you can download all those notes. And that's what I do there. But I keep track of all these resources and stories on the spreadsheet so I can refer back to them quickly. Every day I listen to Darren Hardy's Darren Daily. It's a 5 to 10 minute little motivational speech, and he brings in various resources. And I also listen to John Maxwell's Minute with Maxwell every day. I enjoy Sean Croxton's quote of the day. So there are different resources that I listen to on a daily basis. I take notes from, and then that helps me with my coaching. It helps me with my own life. As a coach, a lot of times I'm helping people find the resources. So that's the librarian in me, always helping people find their resources. But one big thing, like I said, having to juggle both jobs is to be very intentional with what we do. Is it going to, many times I'll ask if I have a task on my list and find out, is this going to bring me closer to our goals? Is this going to bring us closer to the success that we desire? And sometimes it's hard to, pull things out of there. You have to get rid of the weeds in order to get those successes. And that's my story. And I'd be willing to talk more if anything triggered people. But I also want to add, as I mentioned, I know Neri knows, I'm at my daughter's in Michigan, but she had a cup in here, and it's from her gym, but it's Find Your Strength. So I brought that, have my tea in celebration of that in Neri.
That's great. No, thank you for sharing. I took a few notes as you were speaking, just certain things that are really crucial and important, I think, in our journey, in our career, whatever we've set our minds to do, right? And one of the key things that you mentioned in the beginning were those mentors, and how important it is to have mentors, to have people who have gone before us, paved the way, right? Don't be afraid to ask someone. Let's say if you're interested in being, I don't know, for us as a life coach, listen to other life coaches, seek out what they're posting, what works, what doesn't work. And we may have some people around us that we can develop relationships with and ask them, hey, would you be willing to spend a few minutes with me talking about how did you get started? What worked for you? Mentors are crucial. I've had so many over the years, especially when I was in corporate, and some maybe for just a season, some maybe that a season could be a few months or a few years, depending on the relationship that you have with them. Some may be just because you're stuck in an area, and having that discussion with them may help you get unstuck in that area. But that is so crucial, right? When you want to do anything, to listen to others who have gone before you and are successful and have paved the way. I think oftentimes as women, we think we have to do it all. And we have to be trailblazers, and we have to juggle everything in everyone's life. And we typically do that, right? Especially when we have children or when we have other family members that we are kind of responsible for, right? But oftentimes we forget about ourselves and our own self-development and self-growth and what that looks like, because we can't pour out from an empty cup. So we have to get refreshed and refueled and rest as well. So those some of the things that you brought up in the beginning, and that intentionality, right? Or one of the last things you mentioned, how important it is to be intentional. If you really want to do something and you're passionate about it and it's your dream, and how intentional are you being about it? Are you letting everyone else take up your time? I like what you said about that too, as well. You have to revisit. It's like, do I really need to do this? Because everybody's going to pull from you, especially if you're good at something. Guess what? Everybody's going to come to you. But is that bringing your purpose to life? Or is it just sucking the life out of you, or just a distraction from your intended path. And sometimes we just need to step back and not be so quick to say yes. I think Norma put it on the chat where yes, people are like, oh yeah, sure. Yes, I got this. Yes, I can do this. Yeah, no, I'll be there. We're so quick because a lot of us are helpers. We tend to be helpers by nature as women. That's ingrained in us, which is okay. It's a great, great gift to have. But when you're giving so much out of yourself, what are you leaving for you? And it's not a selfish thing. And well, perhaps it is a little bit, but you need that in order to help others. Again, you can't pour out from an empty cup. If you're so giving out, what are you leaving for yourself? And taking the time to be intentional about, okay, what I've learned past few years, I think, because I was one of those, yes, yeah, I got this, I'll make it happen, and working round the clock, whether it be when I was in corporate or in ministry, whatever I was doing, like I was kind of round the clock and would have a few hours of sleep. And then I wasn't very pleasant the next morning because you're tired. We are human. And you have to give yourself grace and mercy, just like you give it to other people. But what does that look like for you when people are asking you stuff and can you do this? And pause. It's like, well, let me check on that. Let me see if I can. Don't be so quick to say yes, right? Just pause and reflect. Well, let me check on that. Let me check my calendar. For those of you who are married, well, let me check with my husband. Let me coordinate. Let me make sure I can. Or just no, it's a full sentence. Sorry, I can't. Actually, you don't even have to say sorry. I take that back because we say sorry way too much. It's like, I can't. Just think about that because we just get ourselves in so many things and are overburdened and overloading ourselves when we shouldn't have to. It's okay. It's okay to say no to something. Are you finding joy in that? And yes, just in thinking that through a little bit, there are times where we're called to sacrifice a little of our time, treasure, talent, whatever that may be for you, right? But that shouldn't be the norm 24 hours a day. That shouldn't be the norm every day. So pause, reflect, and don't be so quick to say yes. And with that, yes, go ahead, Virginia.
I was going to add, the other thing about us saying yes so much is if we say no when we know that it doesn't align with, what we need at that time, give someone else an opportunity to say yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So good.
And someone else will be able to share their gifts, their talents, and they will be able to be successful in that, probably much more so than what we would have had it been we said a yes, then we were resentful afterwards.
Yeah. Being resentful is not a good thing. And we are often more resentful than not because we say yes to things that we really didn't want to do, that we really didn't have the time to do, but you're stretching yourself and you can only stretch yourself but so much before that rubber band breaks. And we need to learn a little bit more about what self-care looks like for us. And for us, for Joanna may be different than for Natalie. For Christina may be different than Norma, right? So you need to learn what works for you so that you can be your best. You could put your best foot forward and show up as the best version of yourself. You don't have to show up like anybody else. Just be you, authentically you and balanced. What does that look like for you? I want to open it up for questions. Anyone has any questions for Virginia or a comment?
I just wanted to say thank you, Virginia, for sharing your story. And I also loved the tips and the tools you use every day. Mm-hmm. Super helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anyone else that found just a nugget in what Virginia shared? I reiterated a few and threw in my own, but
I would love to hear what other tips and tools that people might be utilizing in their own life. Because I read something on LinkedIn this week and it talked about how this person formulates what they post. And I'm like, I can probably use a little bit of that to help myself. So if anyone has any best practices, I'd always love to hear those.
Yes.
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT.
Yes.
That's really something I use on a daily basis.
Hi there. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Lenny.
But if you can hear me, I just want to commend you for not having just one business, but two businesses.
But in the meantime, anyone else has any other comments or questions, or share what resources you use? And oh, by the way, I like what Norma put there. I learned not to respond on emotions, whether it's out of excitement or when she may be upset. So yeah, pause with a purpose, Virginia said. I use my calendar profuse. I can't live without my calendar. I find that in this day and age, we're just bombarded with so much stuff, and my memory is not the same as it used to be. So if I don't write it down, it is gone. If you don't use your calendar, use your calendar, especially from what Virginia said earlier, just to make appointments with yourself. That is crucial, because if you have it there, that block to remind you, whether it is I'm going to take time out to think and strategize, or I'm going to take time out to exercise. Whatever it is for you, once it's on your calendar, I think it kind of pushes you more to get it done. And you can also, once it's on your calendar, say, well, that's another reason why I can't. I have an appointment. You don't need to tell them what appointment you have, because you do have an appointment with yourself, and that's okay. That's more than okay. It's crucial for you to take time out. I literally would put down, and I have it color coded because I'm just crazy like that. I just need I'm very into organization and color coding. Anytime I have anything related to self-development, that will be, let's say, in yellow. Anytime that I'm doing something for church, I would put that in orange. So I would take it right away and look at it right away and know, okay, from 3 to 4, I'm going to work on my self-development. From 10 to 11, I'm going to work on that spreadsheet that I want to put together. So it helps you stay organized. It helps you to stay intentional about those goals, those dreams, those aspirations, whatever it is that you're trying to do. Make those appointments with yourself. Be intentional about it. And you'll see how far that needle starts moving in your life with those things that you're trying to achieve. You'll start seeing the progress, even if it's a little at a time, bite size. Someone told me yesterday, which I was like, is that PC? I don't even know, but eat the elephant one bite at a time. I'm like, I don't know about that. I mean, I've heard it before, but I just thought it was weird. But the whole concept behind it is like, another way to say it is don't boil the ocean all at once. Don't try to do everything at once. We have lots of things we want to accomplish. We want to do. Take it one step. Incremental. I'm big on that word. Incremental, one at a time.
I'd like to add to that, Eneri.
Yes.
One thing that I didn't bring up was accountability. With my husband and I, now that we are working more closely together in the travel business, we have staff meetings every Monday morning. I go over everything that's on my calendar. He goes everything on his. And then we verify what do we need to be doing to help one another. And so whether it's if you have a business partner to be your accountability partner, or somebody, a friend, but I truly believe accountability partners can help in so many aspects of our lives. Yeah. I know Joanne was a fitness instructor. So if you go to a fitness class, that's your accountability. That group is your accountability people. When you go to church, if you're missed at church a few weeks, I'm sure you probably hear from people. They're like, Eneri, where you been? Mm-hmm. But also the accountability of, I have to make this phone call. It's a difficult phone call. I'm going to let you know that I'm doing this. And then someone can follow up with you. Whoever your accountability partner is going to say, how did that phone call go? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Lenny, can you try and chime in now?
Can you guys hear
yes.
me now? Okay. Hallelujah. Sorry. I am in a parking lot waiting for my daughter, but I am writing notes on a receipt. So, Virginia, your story is very amazing. What I was trying to say before is that I commend you for not only having one business, but two businesses. I don't know how you're doing it. And so with that, I do have two questions. How do you keep your, motivation and passion for both businesses at the same time, for starters? That's my first question.
Okay. What's nice about both businesses is every day is a different day.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're working with clients, whether it be on their travel or their personal growth, they're seeing progress every day, whether it be getting them to that location that's been on their bucket list forever, or seeing progress that they had that difficult conversation with a staff member. So knowing that you're a part of that journey is just so exciting. So that's why I usually Sunday nights I'll go over my whole calendar and get it all set. And Monday I'm always raring to go. There are days when maybe you've had a few conversations that didn't go quite as you wanted, phone calls, somebody had to cancel for whatever reason. And if we feel burdened, usually what we'll say is like, okay, let's just stop and walk away. And what we'll do is we'll go for a walk together, whether it be by ourselves or together. And we find that to be rejuvenating. And then we can come back to our desks and look at it with fresh eyes and reaching out. I have team members with Maxwell, Coach Eneri, and I. We get together once a month and we go over things, which is fantastic. With my husband, we have other agents that we can call on. So that helps to have someone else to bounce ideas off of, whether it be successes, frustrations. That's very helpful to being able to share that. But like I said, I love the newness of it every day. That's how I keep my passion.
That's awesome. I can imagine there are very exciting moments in each. So kudos to you. And I think my next question is geared toward you mentioning something about the uncomfortableness of certain moments, right? And walking through those moments of uncomfortableness, which I'm sure we've all experienced. How do you have any techniques to get through those, moments of uncomfortability?
A few things. One is if it's something that I know I have to do and maybe I'm uncomfortable with it, breaking it down. For example, I am probably one of the worst people for a phone call. To have to call people. But if I break it down and if I do it the first thing, if you've ever read Brian Tracy's Eat That Frog, that is always doing the hardest thing first. I've learned that when we put things off, it adds more stress to our lives. So maybe it's already, you're uncomfortable because of whatever the situation is. Maybe it's talking to, a client that might be a little bit disagreeable, making that phone call, making this ask in the sales. I'm still struggling with that, is closing some sales. But if you can break it down into little pieces and do it first, then you're easier to get through it. And with my husband and I, we each have strengths and weaknesses that balance out. So, for example, this morning, he had a client who booked a cruise, but then we saw that there's 3 other people connected to this cruise, meaning they have other cabins. My husband's like, well, why don't you reach out to see if they want to transfer it into our agency. So rather than putting it off, I just did it. And it's like, I tried not to overthink it and did it. That way I'm not stressing out. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to send that email. But I feel that's the biggest thing, is when there's that discomfort, is possible, do it first, get it over with. Because if you overthink it, you're not going to do it, and it's going to make it worse, and your stress is going to be worse. So those are the techniques that I use.
I like what you said. I never thought about it. Number one, doing it first, and then on top of that, breaking it down into pieces, right? That's more, I guess, manageable, instead of trying to take it on at one time. So that's great. Thank you for that. I wrote it down in my receipt.
That's a special receipt.
Yep. Thank you.
And I'll also add is to sometimes if we take the emotions away from it and realize, so say, for example, a client, this happened to my husband one time. My husband quoted a client this very pricey vacation. Well, the client ended up booking direct instead of going through my husband. It was very upsetting because it wasn't just commission, but it's also sales numbers too. But we had to separate that it wasn't anything against my husband. For whatever reason, that's what that client chose to do. And we just had to let it go. So we have to sometimes separate the emotions from whatever process is going on. And that's hard for us as humans. We want everyone to like us. We want everyone to work with us. But sometimes it's not the right time. It's not the right time for you to be working with them. And that's okay. There's going to be somebody else that's going to come along and you're going to have a better experience for it.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Anyone else have a question, comment, or just a thought that you may want to share so that we can expand on it? Or a question, let's see, for all of you. What's the one thing that you're struggling with that you're like, you've hit that ceiling and you're struggling with it and not sure how to move forward? Maybe a little too personal, but it's, so don't put that, but go ahead, Virginia.
I would say my biggest struggle is when I am working, having a conversation with a potential client, and this is specifically for my coaching, and I don't always go to the ask. And I don't know if it's because I'm afraid they're going to say no, or if I'm afraid they're going to think I'm pushy, but I need to learn to say, maybe not phrase it in, do you want to use my services, but come up with other phrases like, how does that sound to you? Come up with other ways to do it without where I feel like I'm pushing on them. Because I myself, I don't like when salespeople are pushy.
Right.
Me. So trying to create that.
Okay. No, thanks for sharing. And along with what you said, Eleni put fear. So, right, it's around the same thing. It's like fear is huge, and everyone experiences fear, especially when you're not in your comfort zone, especially when you're thinking of what the other person is going to say. So because we're making it about ourselves. It's like, are they going to like me? Am I going to do a good job? Am I presenting? So there's all these things for fear just overtakes us. And we need to learn how to shake off fear. And that may be different for you. I know for me, it's like, I've heard so many podcasts and messages, even in church, about like letting go of fear and what does that look like. For me, I'm a woman of faith as well. So I ask my Heavenly Father to help me in those moments that I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Just help me, Lord, to just have the strength. And at times I had to do it afraid. Starting this business, I had to do it afraid. But it came from a place of, I know this is the right thing for me. Right. And so you have to know what is the right thing for you and how do you balance and get out of your own way? Because we get in this bubble of, oh, but what if I do this? What if it doesn't come out right? What if you succeed? And I think some of us are even afraid of that. What is that going to look like? You never know if you don't even try. And at times I feel like it's not till you're sick and tired of being sick and tired that you get out and break out of that shell. But a lot of it for me had to do with getting empowered by, being with other women who encouraged me and knew really my passion and who I was, and be like, no, you can do this, depending on what it is for you. Listening to podcasts, listening to things that are encouraging, listening to self-development. So I feel, and I've said this many times, a lot of you have heard it, but we do our part, God will do his. What does our part look like? Learn. Make sure that you're equipped. If you're giving a presentation, make sure that you are, practicing. Practice makes perfect. Practice, 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 practice. And when you're done with that, practice some more, regardless of what it is that you're trying to do. If you're if in order to get out of that comfort zone, you have to do it. You just have to learn to get out of your own way, give yourself a pep talk. Oftentimes we need others to give us a pep talk, and that's okay. But what if no one's there? Just what's the worst thing that can happen? Ask yourself that. What is the worst thing that can happen if I do this? Count the cost. Balance it out. Write it down. I remember years ago, when it came to making a very important decision, I would do a list of the pros and the cons. And oftentimes when I looked at the cons, there were things that were not based on reality. So I started scratching those off, and then just look at the one that was like, what are the benefits of me doing this? And that eventually will propel me to be like, oh, I have to do this. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for others. It's the right thing to do for me. And that's how you start pushing yourself forward instead of retreating because of the fear that overtakes us. That makes sense? I see your wheels churning, Virginia. Feel free to share.
You just had a fantastic symbolism there. Are we pushing ourselves forward into that opportunity? Are we pushing ourselves away? I mean, that's so profound, Eneri. I love that analogy of that. I'm going to write that down. Yeah. But yeah, when we push away, it's like, no, I don't want it. But when we push ourselves into it or pull it towards us, yeah. And thank you.
Yeah, and to me, that's what it's all about, right? Like what you wrote to positive self-talk is one of the keys. I was tired of being stuck and I didn't want to be stuck anymore. And that's how you have to look at it. Are you tired of feeling that way? What are you going to do to move forward? Isn't it time? Isn't it time you live out your purpose? Isn't it time you found joy and fulfillment? And some of it may be having a conversation with your loved ones, having a conversation with your spouse. It depends on where you are, right? And what it is that you're stuck in and where it is that you're trying to break through. Speak to a mentor, speak to someone that you trust. That's not just going to be like, oh, yeah. No, that's actually going to listen with the intent to understand and with the intent to help you move forward. Not tell you what to do, but with the intent to help you move forward. That makes sense? So, and with that, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you guys for joining us. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Virginia, for being vulnerable, sharing your story. And I hope that you all get a little nugget from this call today. Take care. Thanks a ton.